Hello and welcome to another episode of Center Stage with ICS Theatre. I'm your host, Anita Mantri, bringing to you another captivating show tonight, so stay tuned. Our guest tonight is the head of the BA Theatre program and associate professor at the Mason Goss School of Arts at Rutgers University in New Jersey, Mr. Marshall Jones III. He is also the director of the Rutgers Summer Acting Conservatory for high school students. With over 30 years of theater experience under his belt, he has served in various roles at some of the most prestigious New York City theater venues, such as the Apollo Theater, Madison Square Garden, Radio City Music Hall, and Disney's The Lion King. He served as a producing artistic director of the Tony Award-winning Crossroads Theater Company here in New Jersey for 13 years, up until December of 2019. At the end of the day, he is a director at heart and has directed several plays, including A Christmas Carol, the musical at Madison Square Garden, and the off-Broadway sensational hit Little Rock, which became the New York Times critic pick of the season. Little Rock tells the riveting true story of the Little Rock Nine, the first Black students to attend the city's formerly segregated Central High School. He has also given his heart and soul to some of the most wonderful gems, such as the world premiere of Walter Mosley's Lift, which later played at 59 East 59, Nicole Salter's Repairing a Nation, world premieres of Beyond the Oak Trees about Harriet Tubman, and Pia Wilson's Back to the Real, to name a few. Mr. Jones is as passionate about serving the community as he is about the field of performing arts. He was the commissioner of the New Jersey Public Broadcasting Authority. He's a member of the Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers, the Dramatists Guild, and the Society of Stage Directors. For 8 years, Mr. Jones proudly served on the board of directors of the Theatre Communication Group, and he currently serves as the president of the board of the New Jersey Theatre Alliance. Welcome to this episode of Center Stage with ICS Theatre, Mr. Jones. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
It's our pleasure. I have a lot to talk to you about, and without wasting another minute, I want to get right to it. So, Mr. Jones, from a bachelor's in the theater program in Rutgers to producing and directing shows at some of the world's most popular venues in New York City, such as Apollo Theater, Madison Square Garden, Radio City Music Hall, what was your journey like, and where did it all begin?
Wow, thank you for that question. Well, it all began in Hillside, New Jersey. I was always interested in theater. None of my family is in theater, but there was just something about a live audience and telling a story in front of that live audience that always captivated me. So I went to Rutgers, and at that point in time, though, I really wanted to study directing, and I got great training as a director from Mr. Hal Scott. But then my senior year, I got interested in producing. So I kind of took a little shift and went to NYU grad school to study producing, and came out with my master's, and I worked in a couple of small theater companies in New York. And then the Apollo came calling in 1991. So that was very, very special part of my career. So in the 90s, all of that work just kind of built on itself, going to Madison Square Garden. And I really didn't leave Madison Square Garden. We purchased Radio City Music Hall in 1997. So I just moved, they moved my office to Radio City. And then Lion King happened, and then Rutgers happened. So I kind of, almost 20 years later, came back to where it all began at Rutgers, and that was 2002, and I've been in Rutgers ever since. So that's kind of the journey. There really hasn't been kind of like a master plan. It kind of just evolved as I went forth in my career.
Right. And that's how it should be. It's great. What was it like working at Lion King?
Lion King was quite extraordinary. So I came there in 2000. So the show was only 3 years old at the time, and I was the company manager. And it basically was what Hamilton is now.
Mhm.
Although the tickets didn't cost that much,
Right.
everybody wanted to see it. So virtually every night we had celebrities, whether it was Bill and Hillary Clinton, rock stars, athletes, everyone wanted to see the show. And it's such a uplifting and heartwarming story. And because the movie was so popular, people knew the story, but the way Julie Taymor, the director, unfolded the story was just stunning, particularly the opening moments with Circle of Life. And what's
Right.
also pleasing is that there are now new generations of young
Mhm.
people being groomed and being introduced to theater by seeing the show. So it was a special time. And I look back now on the cast members, and I'm still friends with several of them. Several of them have gone on to bigger and great things.
Mhm.
So that was a great part of my life, being a part of that show. Yes.
And it is obviously such a phenomenal show that it's been on for years, and even today when people see it, people get goosebumps.
Yes, absolutely. In 2017, Disney had a 20-year anniversary for the show, and they got in touch with everyone who is connected with the show, and it just was a really, really powerful show. I mean, the people playing the lead roles, the Nalas, the Mufasas, are
Mhm.
performing in front of original cast members and just entire companies of shows of actors and performers. So it was a really, really special night. Disney did a great job. It was a great party afterwards. Memorable. It was just memorable.
Great, great. That's awesome. Shifting gears a little bit now, when you were at Crossroads Theatre, uh, what was it like? What was your experience like there in trying to meet the goal and showcasing more realistic intricacies of Black life in contrast to, how it's typically trivialized or cliched in the popular media that we see?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I came to Crossroads in 2007, and it was right before Crossroads was celebrating its 30th anniversary. So it was a special time in the company's history. It just reopened its doors a few years earlier. But the main point is the mission did not change from 2007 to 1978. And that is to speak authentically about Black life and Black voices. And that's not necessarily limited to America. Black voices in terms of South Africa and the Caribbean and African immigrants in Europe. So we really wanted to tell these very nuanced and sophisticated stories, and Crossroads provided that platform. Now, in 1978, when Crossroads was first started, it was the only game in town. And it's pleasing that other theater companies are producing works written and by Black people and African Americans. However, when there is an authentic voice and it's being produced by an authentic voice, and all your artists and your actors are surrounded by people who understand these stories in a really, really nuanced way, you get a special product. You get a special result. So that's what was really important about that. And the other thing I'll say is that by sharing these stories are not just designed for African American people, they're designed for the world. And what we try to do is show how universal it is. So the culture may be different, the skin color might be different, but in its essence, we're all the same. So a white person who's in the audience and watching the show, and the play is about a teenager's experience trying to cope with the restrictions and discipline from a mother and a father.
Mhm.
It's like, wow, that's very similar to my to their experience. So that's one of the things that was really, really pleasing, to be able to share these stories with the world.
Right. That's amazing. Now, you have always been a huge promoter of women's voices as well in
Mhm.
this field, and especially women of color. And um, of course, we know it's really, really important. According to you, what was it that prompted you to give that push and to give that support and to give that voice to the cause?
That's a great question. I can say that there's never been a conscious uh, goal to uplift women voices. What it was is interesting stories, you know. So um, Crossroads has always been about giving voice to the voiceless. And if you look at the plethora of writers, it's mostly male, no matter what the culture, what the race, what the ethnicity is. It's dominated by males. So if I'm reading 10 plays and 4 of them are by men, and I'm sorry, 6 of them are by men and 4 of them are by women, I don't have a checkbox. It's just that, wow, you know, these 2 plays written by these women are taking on issues and subject matters that are interesting to me. Therefore, I am more inclined to want to produce them. But it was
Mhm.
never a conscious kind of like, okay, let me add this women voice. Let me tell this women voice. One of the things that I'm proud of is the final season of Crossroads in our older space. You know, the building was knocked down to create space for the New Brunswick Performing Arts Center. But our
Mhm.
final season, we picked 4 women playwrights to highlight. And that just kind of happened. You know, I had the 4 plays that we wanted to do, and I'm like, wow, they're all women. So we kind of promoted the season as a celebration of the voices of women.
And it's really great. I mean, we definitely need more people like you in the world to celebrate women, to bring women's voices in the forefront. It's a really, really great cause.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely. I mean, we've it's a different perspective
yeah.
and more interesting
And
perspective, if you ask me.
right. Many times this perspective gets lost in this patriarchal world that we live in. But it's always just a breath of fresh air when we have people like you um, taking that perspective into account and bringing it to the people.
My pleasure.
Now, this past year and a half has been a really challenging year for performing arts, needless to say. So, with the pandemic and everything, or the theaters being shut down for a while now. How has this pandemic affected theater education, and how do you make it work? How have you made it work so far?
Absolutely. Well, education has really been challenging. Um, Unlike the field, uh, at Rutgers, we did not shut down, and most universities did not shut down. And I think we're really fortunate that this pandemic happened now versus, say, 10 years ago when Zoom was in its infancy,
Right.
and there's no way um, their technology would have been able to handle this sudden growth. Um, so that's a really, really big plus. And on the field side, theaters were very resourceful. Um, they figured out how to do readings on Zoom, showing old tapings of shows on Zoom. So they've been really, really resourceful and creative and innovative in the fact that, well, we can't have live audiences. In terms of education, particularly at Rutgers, it was a huge challenge. So in our students in their third year, they go to London to study at Shakespeare's Globe. Well, as you can imagine, that was all shut down. So you had all these juniors who were stuck. So those students took a leave of absence, and they're in London now. But then there were the sophomores, the second years, who were right behind them, who are there now as well. So we actually have two classes, their senior year, which they're supposed to come back, but they're over there in London now, and the juniors who are currently there now. We also had an incoming class that was remote. And if you saw any of the notices in the press during the pandemic, President Holloway, the president of Rutgers, would say that, well, Rutgers is online, remote learning with few exceptions. So one of the exceptions was the nursing program, because there's a nursing shortage, and they felt that it was really important to have the nursing students in person. I believe certain engineering, where they needed access to the lab, and the theater program. So the fall of 2020, we were allowed to have the students return on campus. They were tested 2 times a week. All the classes were socially distanced. Rutgers made lots of investments in the HVAC system. So our students were actually on campus in the fall of 2020 and the spring of 2021. There were a couple outbreaks. After all, these are college students, 20 years old, they feel invincible. But when a couple positive tests happened, we had to shut down immediately to be able to accommodate the in terms of CDC guidelines. But we were able to get through it, and I'm very excited because in a couple of weeks we'll be back in class. Rutgers was one of the first schools to insist that all incoming students show vaccination, with the exception of a medical or religious exemption. I think the number is like 98% of the students have had the vaccine. And it's strongly encouraged for the faculty. And I think it's also in the 90% that the faculty are vaccinated. So we're excited. It'll be a lot of fun to actually have students in a classroom.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody is looking forward to it. And more importantly, people are looking forward to, being back in the theaters and just getting back to the way life was before.
Absolutely. Yeah. Although I don't think we're ever going to go back to exactly the way it was.
Probably.
My hope is that audiences have a higher level of appreciation for theater as an art form, a higher appreciation of each other in terms of humanity, and that, this pandemic has shut down the world. Every corner of the planet was affected by it. And that just goes to show the power of nature and natural forces, but we're all in this world together. So that's my hope.
That's the hope for all of us. So now theater has really come a long way in the past couple of decades, so to speak, in a way that it portrays now a more truer cross-section of the society that we live in. Whether you talk about Broadway or even local regional theater, there is a more openness and more acceptance to having a very mixed cast, and not the way that traditionally the roles were played. Now we seem to be headed in the right direction. But according to you, what more can be done, or what more needs to be done in taking that next step towards inclusion and, just blurring the lines of diversity?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the thing to recognize is that diversity does not stop with what's on the stage, or for film and television, what you see on the screen. Diversity needs to be throughout all levels, particularly the power, the producer, the people, the executives at the studios, the owners of the studios. So I think we need to start there. I believe by having diversity up there, you're going to get a stronger commitment to these issues, and then it will trickle down. It will trickle down in terms of people who are directing. It'll trickle down to all of the creative people, lights, sets, design, costumes. It'll trickle down to advertising and marketing, having diversity for those people who can understand that. It will trickle down with who's building the sets and the costumes and so forth. So until that's achieved, we don't have true diversity, because we're also creating works of art. And you can do a play about Black people, or South Asian people, or people of Chinese descent, whomever. But if you have not created an environment that's conducive to creating that work, you're not going to be able to achieve its maximum. So you want to make sure the designers, your press people, everyone have that level of diversity. So that's what we need that is the ultimate goal. And when we reach that, then I think we will arrive at a better point.
Right, right. Now, for a little lighthearted question, that was quite heavy. What was your most memorable project throughout your career?
There've been a lot. I would say the most memorable moment occurred to me in 2012. There was a show that Crossroads produced, and it was a world premiere of a play called Fly, and it was about the Tuskegee Airmen of the Second World War. And this was an exclusive cadre of Black pilots who were being trained because the Army was still segregated in World War II. It wasn't integrated until Korea in the 50s. But so Black soldiers and white soldiers could not fight alongside each other. But the powers that be had the idea for this escort bombing squadron. And the missions are very, very dangerous, because you are flying low to draw the German planes to chase them. Meanwhile, B-52 bombers are further up in the air, dropping bombs on their various targets. So it was very, very dangerous missions. And they trained Black pilots to be escorts. Very, very dangerous. They were highly successful, highly successful. I think they only lost like maybe 1 or 2 fighter pilots after 3,000 missions, which was really incredible. So my point is that Ricardo Kahn wrote and directed, and he's the co-founder of Crossroads. He wrote and directed that play. We first did it in 2009, and then a subsequent production was done at the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. It's a very, very historic theater, because that was the theater that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So we actually did that play in that theater. This was October of 2012. My seats were in the first row of the balcony. President Lincoln was about 12 feet away from where I was sitting. There was an American flag draped in his box seats along the
Mhm.
sides. And the Fords also did a great job of flying in several living Tuskegee Airmen. They all wore red jackets, and I looked down over the balcony and saw these 80, 90-year-old men who are true patriots in terms of fighting for the ideals of America. And then to watch that story unfold in the shadow of where Lincoln was shot, looking down, watching these men, watching their life unfold was truly, truly powerful. So that was a moment I will never forget. In terms of accomplishments, in 1999, I was charged with being the chair of a committee to diversify the Rockettes. And I got all of these executives. I got my friends who were dancers. We took them out to lunch and I asked some really, really hard questions, and the ladies answered in an honest way. And as a result of that, we developed a plan to provide more opportunities for women of color in the Rockette lines. And I'm pleased to say that to this day, it's very, very diverse. So that's something that was memorable. In terms of something that I've done directly, there's several shows, but two shows come to mind really quickly. I was hired as a replacement director for a show about the Little Rock Nine. That's about, took place in 1957 when 9 young high school students were brave enough to face racial hatred and violence to integrate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I had 1 week to come in and redirect this show before we had our first preview. And I'm pleased to say we turned it around in a very, very short time. The show was a New York Times critic pick. Bill and Hillary Clinton, who are from Arkansas, came to see the show. The current governor of Arkansas came to see the show, Harry Belafonte's daughter, and they went on Twitter and they talked about how great it was. So that was a really important accomplishment as well. So actually, there are a lot. I feel blessed. But still, those three kind of stand out in my mind.
That's, I mean, your story about, about watching the Tuskegee Airmen in that Ford's Theater gave me goosebumps. So I cannot even imagine what it was like for you to actually be there and witness that. That is something that is really amazing.
Yeah, my young daughter was my youngest daughter was with me too. She was still in high school at that time, so she was old enough to appreciate it. So that was a great experience, having her there as well.
I'm sure. Would you like to tell our viewers a little bit something about your upcoming projects? Anything exciting?
Well, I'll be traveling down to Florida to direct Radio Golf. That was the final play of August Wilson's Century Cycle. He wrote 10 plays, one for every decade of the 20th century, and it really, really chronicles Black life. And since that was also his final play, the final moment of that final play is really, really important because I'm interpreting it as August defining how we should go about the future. So when our lead character, Harmon Hicks, walks out that door, I am hopeful that the audiences in Naples, Florida really can understand the mission that he's going to do when he leaves. So I'm really excited to direct that. Also, during the pandemic, I started a production company, and it's kind of evolved over the last year and a half. But what we do is it's a 10-week consortium where we have students and we study issues about race and issues about identity. We go really, really deep into race, the genesis of race and racism. At the same time, we delve deeply into the identity of the students, revealing things about their artistry And then it becomes a playwriting class. We teach how to write a 10-minute play. So all the students write 10-minute plays. And then my production company will hire professional actors to put them on, and we Zoom them to the world. I taught the class last semester at Rutgers. We had Sam Kitt, who is from India, and he wrote a wonderful little piece about a college student who is trying to get their parents' permission to see a therapist. So someone was kind enough to join us in that production, as well as her daughter, Barka. So that was a great experience. And I'm teaching it over the summer, where it's not affiliated to a university. We have 10 students literally from around the country, aging from an incoming college freshman who's 18 to a 70-year-old Obie Award-winning actress. So those go up at the latter half of September. So I'll make you aware of when that happens if you want to view them.
Great, that's awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, Mr. Jones. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I wish you all the very best with you and your work.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And now it is time for a theater highlight of the day. Although there is still a long way to go towards achieving racial equality, great strides have been made by the performing arts community and Black actors who have recently originated, replaced, or gone on as an understudy to characters that have usually been perceived and portrayed as white. Some amazing accomplishments for representation in recent years include Norm Lewis as Phantom in The Phantom of the Opera, Norma Duwezweni as Hermione in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, Nicolette Robinson as Jenna in Waitress, Aisha Jackson as Anna in Frozen, Michael Lavoie as Alexander Hamilton in Hamilton, Brittany Johnson as Glinda in Wicked, and Christiane Pitts as Anne Darrow in King Kong. These may seem like only a few, but they have broken barriers and paved the pathway to achieve the goal of racial equality for the future. That's it from me today, folks. Stay tuned for our next episode. I'm your host, Anaita Mantri, signing off. I'll see you next time on Center Stage with ICS Theatre. Until then, please take care, be safe, and support the arts. Thank you all for watching, and have a great night.